It's one of the most painful and confusing moments in a woman's love life. Everything seems to be going beautifully. You're connecting on a deep level, sharing vulnerable moments. And for a moment, it feels real. He sees you. You feel safe. You let yourself hope. And then he pulls away. No warning, no closure, just silence. You're left wondering, what did I do wrong? But what if you didn't do anything wrong at all? What if his disappearance isn't rejection, but a deeply misunderstood response to emotional intensity? There's a paradox in love that no one talks about. Sometimes when a man truly starts to feel something real, he gets scared, not of you, but of himself, of what it means to fully love someone, of the version of him he might have to become to deserve you. And instead of moving closer, he vanishes, not because he doesn't care, but because the connection matters too much. In this video, I'm going to walk you through this exact dynamic, the hidden psychology behind why a man may disappear right when you think you've reached his heart. We'll explore what's really going on beneath the surface, why some men retreat when love feels real, and how you can hold your power when he goes quiet. If you've ever felt abandoned or confused by a sudden emotional pullback, you need to hear this. The truth may break your heart, but it can also set it free. And no, this isn't another cliche about he's just not that into you. Because sometimes he's too into you to risk losing himself. There's a moment in almost every romantic connection where things start to feel serious. He opens up, he gets vulnerable, he shares a part of himself that's not surface level. You feel a shift, the emotional bond is building. You might think, this is it, he's finally letting me in. And then, like clockwork, something changes. He starts to pull away. Maybe he takes longer to reply. Maybe he stops initiating calls. The connection that felt so close starts to feel distant, cold. You begin overanalyzing every interaction. Was it something you said? Did you come on too strong? But here's the truth. More often than not, it's not about you. It's about what's happening inside him. When a man starts to feel deeply connected to a woman, his survival instincts can kick in. It's not always conscious, but it's real. For many men, love represents vulnerability. And for someone who hasn't fully dealt with his inner emotional landscape, getting too close too quickly can feel overwhelming, even threatening. Love requires surrender, presence, accountability. But most of all, it requires a willingness to be seen. And that's terrifying for someone who is taught that emotions are weakness, that asking for help is shameful, or that masculinity means self-containment at all costs. So when a man begins to feel those walls crumbling, his default reaction may be to retreat, not because he wants to hurt you, but because the intensity of real connection feels unfamiliar and unsafe. Think of it like this. When a man begins to fall in love, he starts to lose control. And for many, that's not exciting. It's scary. Love threatens the illusion of independence. Suddenly he has something to lose. And losing you, that would hurt. So instead of risking that pain, he distances himself before it gets too real. This pullback isn't always logical. It's often an instinctive reaction, rooted in past wounds, childhood trauma, heartbreak, abandonment issues, even fear of failure. And here's the paradox. The more he feels, the more he may run, because those feelings disrupt the emotional numbness he's relied on for so long. This is why women often feel blindsided. The connection was real, but real doesn't always mean ready. So what can you do when this happens? First, don't chase, don't shrink, don't try to fix it. His reaction isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of his capacity. Instead, observe, give him space, focus on your emotional center, and most importantly, stay in your power. If he returns, it needs to be because he chose to, not because you pulled him back. And if he doesn't, that's your answer too. Men don't pull away because they're bored. They pull away because it matters. The ones who aren't serious don't need distance. They're already detached. But the ones who are feeling something deep, they often need space to figure out how to handle it. And sometimes silence is not the end. It's the beginning of him learning how to show up right. It sounds completely backward, doesn't it? That someone would walk away because they love you. That a man could disappear not out of indifference, but out of something deeper, more complex, more vulnerable. But here's the thing about real love. It shakes people. It strips away layers. And for some, especially men who haven't learned how to feel safely, love becomes both beautiful and terrifying. When a man disappears after developing a deep emotional connection, it can sometimes be a sign that he's overwhelmed by how real it's starting to feel. Unlike casual interest or fleeting attraction, love demands more than he might be ready to give. It forces him to confront himself, his fears, his insecurities, his unresolved past. And for many, that confrontation feels like standing too close to a flame. He doesn't want to burn you, so he pulls away. This isn't an excuse. This isn't about tolerating emotional immaturity or poor communication. It's about understanding the why behind the behavior. Because when you understand it, you stop internalizing it. You stop making it mean something about your worth. For some men, disappearing is not about wanting to leave you. It's about needing to find themselves. It's about trying to navigate emotions they've never allowed themselves to feel. They're not ghosting to hurt you. They're retreating to protect their own fragile sense of identity that's being challenged by the power of the connection. You see, love has a way of triggering everything we've buried. A man who's never felt safe to express vulnerability will often run from the one person who sees him most clearly. Not because he doesn't want you, but because he doesn't know how to be seen without feeling exposed. You've touched a part of him he's been hiding from the world, maybe even from himself. That kind of exposure feels like a threat, not a gift. So what does this mean for you? It means you don't chase. You don't shrink. You don't try to prove your worth to someone too scared to hold it. You let him disappear, if that's what he needs. Because if it is love, he'll come back stronger, clearer, more grounded. And if it's not, you've made space for the kind of love that doesn't vanish when it gets real. Real love doesn't always look like closeness. Sometimes it looks like distance. But love that returns after fear isn't weak. It's been tested. And love that's tested and chooses you again, that's the love worth waiting for. When words stop flowing, we often assume the worst. He's not texting, not calling, not reaching out like he used to, and your mind races to fill in the blanks. He doesn't care anymore. He's moved on. I meant nothing. But the truth is, silence isn't always empty. In fact, silence can be loud if you know how to listen to what's unsaid. Men don't always express themselves through language. Many were never taught how. From a young age, boys are often conditioned to suppress emotion, to man up, to stay composed and avoid showing vulnerability. So when deep feelings arise, especially romantic ones, they often don't have the words to match what's going on inside. But that doesn't mean nothing's happening. It just means you need to look beyond his voice and into his actions. Start noticing the subtle signals. Does he still watch your stories or check in on your social media? That may seem small, but it can be a way of staying connected without facing the vulnerability of a conversation. Has he kept items of yours, never returned your things, or held onto photos and memories instead of cutting ties? That's not detachment. That's holding on quietly. And then there are the indirect actions. Talking about you to mutual friends, checking in on your well-being through someone else, or even trying to improve himself in silence, starting therapy, working on his goals, going inward to become the man he knows you deserve. These aren't just coincidences. They're silent actions that reveal intention. Of course, not all silence is meaningful. There's a difference between healthy space and emotional manipulation. The key is to feel the energy behind the silence. Does it feel like avoidance, or does it feel like someone who's quietly holding space? Is it abandonment, or is it hesitation with weight behind it? Silence doesn't always mean indifference. In many cases, it means he's overwhelmed, reflecting, or afraid. Think about it. When you feel deeply and don't know how to say it, don't you sometimes pull away to protect yourself from messing it up? Men do the same. But often, their withdrawal isn't rejection, it's a protective pause. Your job isn't to decode every move or wait around forever. But it is wise to understand that some of the loudest messages are sent without words. Silence can be full of emotion, full of fear, and sometimes full of love. So next time he disappears, don't just hear the silence, read it, because sometimes what he's not saying is exactly what he's feeling. Not all disappearances are created equal. While some men pull away because they're overwhelmed by genuine emotion, others disappear for very different reasons, and those reasons have nothing to do with love. It's critical to recognize when distance is a sign of emotional processing, and when it's a red flag waving right in front of you. Here's the truth. Sometimes, when a man disappears, it's not a love story. It's a pattern, a way of avoiding intimacy, dodging accountability, or keeping options open. He might come on strong in the beginning, saying all the right things, making big promises, getting emotionally close, only to vanish once he feels like he has your attention or affection. That's not depth. That's emotional manipulation.
Disappearing can also be a sign of emotional immaturity. Some men don't have the tools to navigate conflict, emotional responsibility, or real connection. So instead of communicating discomfort, they vanish. They choose the easy way out, leaving you confused, questioning your worth, and stuck in a cycle of overthinking. But hear this clearly. A man who cares will find a way to communicate. Silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just avoidance in disguise.
Then there's the player energy, the man who gets what he wants, and then checks out emotionally. He wasn't overwhelmed by love. He wasn't scared by the depth of connection. He was never truly invested in building something real. He was present for the chase, not the commitment. If he disappears and shows no signs of emotional accountability, empathy, or effort to return with clarity, take it as the sign it is. You also have to watch for patterns. Has he disappeared before? Is this a cycle? Get close, pull away, come back when it's convenient. That's not romantic. That's emotionally unsafe. Don't confuse inconsistency with passion. True love may take space, but it doesn't leave you guessing your value. So how can you tell the difference between a man who disappears out of fear and one who disappears out of disinterest or disrespect? Look at what follows the silence. Does he return with depth, growth, or genuine explanation? Or does he come back like nothing happened, trying to pick up where he left off with charm and surface level affection? Does he acknowledge the hurt his absence caused? Or does he deflect, deny, or even gaslight you into thinking you overreacted? His return tells the story. A man who loves will eventually face himself and you with honesty. A man who's just playing a game will never offer more than excuses and breadcrumbs. At the end of the day, silence has a voice. But you must decide what version of silence you're willing to accept. Love can be messy, yes, but it should never be confusing forever. If his disappearance doesn't come with accountability, growth, or clarity, it doesn't mean something deeper. It just means it's time to walk away. When a man pulls away, your first instinct might be to close the gap, to reach out, to ask what's wrong, to fix it. Because you felt the connection. And now that it's shifting, your energy naturally wants to restore harmony. But this is where true feminine power is tested, not in how you move toward him, but in how you choose to move within yourself. The feminine response to distance is not reaction, it's recalibration. We live in a world that praises action, chase, and effort. But the feminine isn't about pursuit. It's about magnetism. It's about drawing in, not chasing down. When he pulls away, the natural energetic shift isn't to run after him. It's to soften into yourself, to expand inward, to return home to your own heart. Because here's the truth. The way you respond to his distance tells him more about your value than any words ever could. If you immediately text, over-explain, or try to make things okay, you're sending a signal that your peace depends on his presence, that your security is external, not internal, that love must be earned, chased, or convinced. And that's not feminine energy. That's survival mode dressed in fear. But when you pause, when you pull your energy back without anger or anxiety, when you stop trying to decode every move and instead nurture your own joy, your own beauty, your own inner world, that's when you become magnetic. The feminine doesn't punish. It doesn't chase. It doesn't plead. It allows. It trusts the silence. It trusts the pullback. And it trusts itself enough to know that what's real will never require force to stay. So how do you shift into that space? You begin by reclaiming your attention. Bring it back from his last text, his absence, his silence, and place it fully on you. What lights you up? What makes you feel alive, beautiful, grounded? You focus on reconnecting with your radiance, not for his attention, but because it's your birthright. You step into stillness with strength. You stop overthinking. You stop reaching. You sit in the discomfort, if you must. And instead of chasing clarity from him, you create clarity within yourself. This doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you pretend to be unbothered. It means you respond with emotional maturity and energetic sovereignty. You say, I trust myself. I trust the connection. And I don't need to beg to be chosen. You also become discerning. You watch what follows the distance. Because a man who is simply fearful but connected will eventually move back towards you with honesty and intention. But a man who is just emotionally unavailable will continue to breadcrumb or disappear altogether. Your calm energy, your non-reaction, forces the truth to reveal itself. The feminine is not passive. It's powerful. It's receptive. And most importantly, it's patient. It knows that the man who is meant for you will not be scared away by your stillness. In fact, it's often your non-reactivity that invites him to rise, to meet you at your level, to step out of confusion and into clarity. Because only in your grounded feminine can the masculine feel safe enough to return, not to a woman who chased him, but to a woman who never left herself. When distance enters the dynamic, don't let it pull you out of alignment. Let it pull you deeper into you. When a man suddenly disappears, it can feel like your world tilts. One moment you were building something real, sharing connection, laughing, opening your heart, and the next he's gone. No calls, no texts, just silence. Your mind races. Was it me? Did I do something wrong? Should I reach out? But here's the shift that separates high-value women from the rest. She doesn't spiral when he vanishes. She stabilizes. She doesn't chase. She doesn't panic. She returns to herself. Staying high value when a man disappears is not about pretending you don't care. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that his silence doesn't shake your foundation. It's about choosing self-respect over self-abandonment every single time. Let's break this down. The high-value woman understands that her energy is sacred. When a man vanishes, she doesn't immediately give him the benefit of the doubt. She doesn't chase clarity or demand closure. Why? Because she knows that a man who truly respects and values her would never disappear without communication. And if he does, that's all the closure she needs. She views his disappearance not as a loss, but as a reveal. His silence becomes her information. Instead of asking, why did he leave? She asks, what does this teach me about how I want to be loved? A high-value woman also resists the urge to bargain with her dignity. She doesn't send long emotional messages, trying to pull him back with guilt or persuasion. She understands that attraction built on neediness is short-lived, and real connection only deepens in mutual respect and emotional maturity. So what does she do instead? She pivots inward. She nourishes herself. She leans into her goals, her friendships, her joy. She doesn't use the silence to prove her value to him. She uses it to remember her value for herself. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more she detaches from trying to control his behavior, the more powerful she becomes in his eyes. Because nothing shakes a man like a woman who doesn't beg for his presence. It signals strength, emotional intelligence, and the kind of self-love that refuses to shrink for anyone. A high-value woman also trusts time. She understands that sometimes people need to step back in order to recognize what they had. But she doesn't wait around in the meantime. She continues to live fully, love herself fiercely, and attract what aligns with her highest standard. If he returns, it's on her terms. She doesn't let him re-enter like nothing happened. She observes. She listens to actions, not just words. Because being high value isn't about having high walls. It's about having high filter. She doesn't punish him for leaving, but she also doesn't reward inconsistency with instant access. And if he doesn't come back, the woman who knows her worth doesn't fear being alone. She fears shrinking to be tolerated. She's not here to convince someone to stay. She's here to attract someone who never wants to leave. A while ago, I had a conversation with a man that completely shifted the way I view relationships and emotional distance. It's a conversation that stuck with me, and I think it might resonate deeply with you, especially if you've ever felt confused or frustrated by someone pulling away. We were talking about the intricacies of love, vulnerability, and the reasons people, especially men, tend to disappear when they get close. He looked at me and with a genuine, almost pained expression, he said, The closer I get to someone, the more I pull away. It's not because I don't care. It's because I care too much. He continued. It sounds backwards, I know, but I've always struggled with the idea of loving someone deeply because I'm scared of losing them. The closer I get, the more I feel like I'm losing my sense of self. I can't explain it. It's like I need to pull back just to remind myself I'm still me. Tamlilo. I remember being struck by the raw honesty in his voice. He didn't mince words. He wasn't trying to excuse his behavior. He was simply explaining something that so many people, women especially, might not realize. Sometimes the very act of retreating comes from a place of deep emotional conflict, not from a lack of affection. In that moment, I realized that what many women experience as withdrawal isn't always about losing interest. It's often about a man feeling overwhelmed by his own emotions. For some men, loving someone fully feels like a risk, because with love comes vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust, both in the other person and in themselves. He went on to explain something even more profound. When I care about someone, I want to be the best version of myself for them. But the more I care, the more I feel the pressure of that responsibility. And it scares me. I pull away because I'm afraid of letting them down, of not being enough, of not being able to protect them like I want to. What struck me the most was how he talked about his fear of not being enough. Men, in my experience, often don't openly talk about insecurities the way women might. Instead, they internalize them and retreat when they feel like they're not meeting their own expectations or the expectations of the people they love. The man's words gave me a whole new perspective on why some men disappear, especially when things start to get serious. It's not always about wanting to hurt the other person. It's often about an internal battle where they're trying to reconcile their feelings with their fears. The truth is, love can feel incredibly overwhelming when you're not emotionally equipped to handle it. Instead of leaning into the discomfort, they pull away, not because they don't care, but because they're trying to protect themselves from the fear of failing in love. That conversation shifted how I view emotional distance. I've always believed that love should be a place of safety and connection. But what this man made me realize is that sometimes people pull away not because they're rejecting love, but because they're rejecting the fear that comes with being fully vulnerable. They love, but they're afraid of how deep that love could go and what it might mean for them. So if you've ever felt like someone vanished just as things were getting real, take a step back and consider that their absence could be rooted in their own struggle with intimacy. It doesn't excuse poor communication or inconsistency, but it does shed light on a crucial truth. When a man loves you deeply, he's not always ready to show it. Sometimes he disappears to deal with his own fears first. And when he comes back, it's usually because he's wrestled with that fear and learned how to embrace his vulnerability. The key is to never internalize their absence as a reflection of your worth. If anything, it's a reflection of their inner battle. And the man who's brave enough to face that battle and return, that's the one worth waiting for. When you're faced with emotional distance or silence, the most powerful thing you can do is detach, but not in the way you might think. Detaching doesn't mean shutting off your feelings, becoming cold, or pretending you don't care. It's about reclaiming your power, sovereignty, and peace, no matter what he's doing or not doing. Detaching with power is about recognizing that you are complete as you are. You don't need